Hello and welcome back to A Year with Aquinas, Day 6, where we are reading his Summa Theologica. We are currently in the first part, question 9, the immutability of God. You can follow along with me on newadvent.org/summa. We are continuing Article 2. Article 2. Whether to be immutable belongs to God alone. Objection 1. It seems that to be immutable does not belong to God alone, for the philosopher says that, quote, matter is in everything which is moved, end quote. But according to some, certain created substances, such as angels and souls, have not matter. Therefore, to be immutable does not belong to God alone. Reply to objection 1. This objection proceeds from mutability as regards substantial or accidental being, for philosophers treated movements of such. Objection 2. Further, everything in motion moves to some end. What therefore has already attained its ultimate end is not in motion, but some creatures have already attained their ultimate end, as all the blessed in heaven. There are some creatures that are unmovable. Reply to objection 2. The good angels, besides their natural endowment of immutability of being, have also immutably of the election by divine power. Nevertheless, there remains in them mutability as regards place. Objection 3. Further, everything which is mutable is variable, but forms are invariable, for it is said that, quote, form is essence consisting of simple and invariable, end quote. Therefore, it does not belong to God alone to be immutable. Reply to objection 3. Forms are called invariable, forasmuch as they cannot be the subjects of variation, but they are the subject to variation, because by them their subject is variable. Hence, it is clear that they vary insofar as they are, for they are not called beings as though they were the subjects of being, but because through them something has being. On the contrary, Augustine says, quote, God alone is immutable, and whatever he has made, being from nothing, are mutable. End quote. I answer that God alone is altogether immutable, whereas every creature is in some way mutable. Be it known, therefore, that a mutable thing can be called so in two ways: by the power in itself, and by a power possessed by another. For all creatures before they existed were possible, not by any created power, since no creature is eternal, but by the divine power alone, inasmuch as God could produce them into existence. Thus, they are the production of a thing into essence thus the production of a thing into essence depends on the will of God, so likewise it depends on his will that they should be preserved. For he does not preserve them otherwise than by ever giving them existence. Hence, if he took away his action from all of them, all things would be reduced to nothing, as appears from Augustine. Therefore, as it was in the Creator's power to produce them before they existed in themselves, so likewise it is in the Creator's power when they exist in themselves to bring them to nothing. In this way, therefore, by the power of authority of another, namely of God, they are immutable, inasmuch as they are producible from nothing by him, and are reducible from existence into non-existence. If, however, a thing is called mutable by power in itself, thus also in some manner every creature is mutable. For every creature has a twofold power, active and passive. And I call that the passive power, which enables anything to attain its perfection in either being or in attaining to its end. Now, if the mutability of a thing be considered according to its power from being, in that way all creatures are not mutable, but only those in which it has the potential in them and is consistent with non-being. Hence, in the inferior bodies there is mutability both as regards substantial being, inasmuch as their matter can exist with privation of their substantial form, and also as regards their accidental being, supposing the subject to coexist with privation of accident, as, for example, this subject, man, can exist with, quote, not whiteness, end quote, and can therefore be changed from white to non-white. But supposing the accident to be such as follows on the essential principles of the subject, then the privation of such an accident cannot exist with the subject. Hence, the subject cannot be changed as regards that kind of accident. For example, snow cannot be made black. Now, in the celestial bodies, matter is not consistent with privation of form, because the form perfects the whole potentiality of the matter. Therefore, these bodies are not mutable as to the substantial being, but only as to locality, because the subject is consistent with the privation of this or that place. On the other hand, incorporeal substances, being subsistent forms which, although with respect to their own existence, are as potentiality to act, are not consistent with the privation of this act, for as much as existence is consequent upon form, and nothing corrupts except it loses its form. Hence, in the form itself there is no power to non-existence. So these kinds of substances are immutable and invariable as regards to their existence. Wherefore Dionysius says that, quote, intellectually created substances are pure from generation, and from every variation are also are also incorporeal and immaterial substances. End quote. There still remains in them a twofold mutability, one as regards their potentiality to their end, and in that way there is in them a mutability according to choose from good to evil, as Damascene says, the other as regards place, inasmuch as by their finite power they attain to certain fresh places, which cannot be said of God, who by his infinity fills all places, as was shown above. Thus, every creature in every creature there is a potentiality to either change as regards substantial being, as in the case of corporeal things, or as regards locality, only as in the case of celestial bodies, or as regards the order to their end, and the application of the power to diverse objects, as is in the case with angels. And universally, all creatures are generally mutable by the power of the Creator, and whose power is the existence and non-existence. Hence, since God is in none of these ways mutable, it belongs to him alone to be altogether immutable. Question 10. The eternity of God. Article 1. Whether this is a good definition of eternity, quote, the simultaneously whole and perfect possession of interminable life. Objection 1. It seems that this definition of eternity, as given by Boethius, is not a good one. Quote, eternity is the simultaneously whole and perfect possession of the interminable life. End quote. For the world is not interminable. For the word interminable is a negative one, but by negation only belongs to that which is defective, and this does not belong to eternity. Therefore, in this definition of eternity, the word interminable ought not to be found. Reply to objection 1. Simple things are usually defined by way of negation, as, quote, a point is that which has no parts, end quote. Yet this is not to be taken as if the negation belongs to their essence, but because our intellect, which first apprehends compound things, cannot attain the knowledge of simple things except by removing the opposite. Objection 2. Further, entity signifies a certain kind of duration, but duration regards existence rather than life. Therefore, the word life ought not to come into the definition of eternity, but rather the word existence. Reply to objection 2. What is truly eternal is not only being, but also living, and life extends to operation, which is not true of being. Now, the protraction of the duration seems to belong to operation rather than to being. Hence, the time is the numbering of movement. Objection 3. Further, a whole is what has parts, but this is alien to eternity, which is simple. Therefore, it is improper to be said, quote, whole. End quote. Reply to objection 3. Eternity is called whole, not because it has parts, but because it is wanting in nothing. Objection 4. Many days cannot occur together, nor can many times exist all at once. But in eternity, days and times are in the plural, for it is said, quote, his going forth is from the beginning, and from the days of eternity, end quote, Micah 5:2. And it is also said, quote, according to the revelation of the mystery hidden from eternity, end quote, Romans 16:25. Therefore, eternity is not omni-simultaneous. Reply to objection 4. As God, although incorporeal, is named in Scripture metaphorically by corporeal names, so eternity, though simultaneously whole, is called by names implying time and succession. Objection 5. Further, the whole and the perfect are the same thing. Supposing, therefore, that it is whole, is superfluously described as perfect. Reply to objection 5. Two things are to be considered in time: time itself, which is successive, and the quote now of time, quote, which is imperfect. Here, the expression simultaneously whole is used to remove the idea of time, and the word perfect is used to exclude the now of time. Objection 6. Further, as duration does not imply possession, durations do not imply possession, but eternity is a kind of duration. Therefore, eternity is not a possession. Reply to objection 6. Whatever is possessed is held firmly and quietly. Therefore, to designate the immutability and permanence of eternity, we use the word possession. There is no on the contrary. I answer that, as we attain to the knowledge of simple things by way of compound things, so we must reach to the knowledge of eternity by means of time, which is nothing but the numbering of movement by before and after. For since succession occurs in every movement, and one part comes after another, the fact that we reckon before and after in movement makes us apprehend time, which is nothing else but the measure of before and after a movement. Now, anything bereft of movement, which is always the same, there is no before or after. As therefore the idea of time consists in the numbering of the before and after a movement, so likewise in the apprehension of the uniformity of the outside of whatever is outside the movement consists in the idea of eternity. Further, those things which are said to be measured by time, which have a beginning and an end in time, because in everything which is moved there is a beginning and there is an end. But whatever is wholly immutable can have no succession, so it has no beginning and no end. Thus, eternity is known from two sources. First, because what is eternal is interminable, that is, has no beginning nor end, that is, no term either way. Secondly, because eternity has no succession, being simultaneously whole. Article 2. Whether God is eternal. Objection 1. It seems that God is not eternal, for nothing made can be predicated of God, for Boethius says that, quote, the now that flows makes away time, the now that stands still makes eternity, end quote. And Augustine says, quote, that God is the author of eternity, end quote. Therefore, God is not eternal. Objection 1. The now that stands still is said to make eternity according to our apprehension, as the apprehension of time is caused in us by the fact that we apprehend the flow of the now. So the apprehension of eternity is caused in us by the apprehending of the now standing still. When Augustine says that God is the author of eternity, this would be understood of the participated eternity. For God communicates his eternity to some in the same way he communicates his immutability. Objection 2. Further, what is before eternity and after eternity is not measured by eternity, but as Aristotle says, quote, God is before eternity and he is after eternity, end quote. Therefore it is written that the Lord, quote, therefore it's written, quote, that the Lord shall reign for eternity and beyond, end quote. Exodus 15:18. Therefore, to be eternal does not belong to God. Excuse me. Reply to objection 2. From this appears the second answer to the objection. For God is said to be before eternity, according as it is shared by immaterial substances. Hence, also in the same book, it is said that, quote, intelligence is equal to eternity, end quote. In the words of Exodus, quote, the Lord shall reign for eternity and beyond, end quote. Eternity stands for age, as another rendering has it. Thus, it is said that the Lord will reign beyond eternity, inasmuch as he endures beyond every age, i.e., beyond every kind of duration. For age is nothing more than the period of each thing, as is said in the book De Coroleo, or to reign beyond eternity can be taken to mean that if any other thing were to consist conceived to exist forever, as the movement of the heavens according to some philosophers, rather, then God would still reign beyond, inasmuch as his reign is simultaneously whole. Objection 3. Further, eternity is a kind of measure, but to be measured belongs not to God. Therefore, it does not belong to him to be eternal. Reply to objection 3. Eternity is nothing else but God himself. Hence, God is not called eternal, as if he were in any way measured by it, but the idea of measurement is there taken according to the apprehension of our mind alone. Objection 4. Further, in eternity there is no present, past, or future, since it is simultaneously whole, as was said in the preceding article. But words denoting present, past, and future in time are applied to God in Scripture. Therefore, God is not eternal. Reply to objection 4. Words denoting different times are applied to God because his eternity includes all times, not as if he himself were altered through present, past, and future. On the contrary, Athanasius says in his creed, quote, "The Father is eternal, the Son is eternal, the Holy Ghost is eternal." End quote. Therefore, I answer that the idea of eternity follows immutability, as the idea of time follows movement, as appears from the preceding article. Hence, as God is supremely immutable, it supremely belongs to him to be eternal. Nor is he eternal alone, but he is his own eternity, whereas no other being is its own duration, as no other is its own being. Now, God is his own uniform being, and hence, as he is his own essence, so he is his own eternity. Article 3. Whether to be eternal belongs to God alone. Objection 1. It seems that it does not belong to God alone to be eternal. For it is written that, quote, "those who instruct many to justice," end quote, "shall be, quote, as stars unto perpetual eternities," end quote. Daniel 12, verse 3. Now, if God alone were eternal, there could not be many eternities. Therefore, God alone. Therefore, God alone is not the only eternal. Reply to objection 1. There are said to be many eternities, accordingly as many share in eternity by the contemplation of God. Objection 2. Further, it is written, quote, "Depart, ye cursed, into eternal fire," end quote. Matthew 25:41. Therefore, God is not the only eternal. Reply to objection 2. The fire of hell is called eternal only because it never ends. Still, there is a change in the pains of the lost, according to the words, quote, "To the extreme heat they will pass from snowy waters," end quote. Job 24:19. Hence, in hell, true eternity does not exist, but rather time. According to the text of the psalm, quote, "Their time will be forever," end quote. Psalm 80:16. Objection 3. Further, every necessary thing is eternal, but there are many necessary things, as, for instance, all the principles of demonstration and all the demonstrated propositions. Therefore, God is not the only eternal. Reply to objection 3. Necessary means a certain mode of truth, and truth, according to the philosopher, is in the mind. Therefore, it is in this sense the true and necessary are eternal, because they are in the eternal mind, which is the divine intellect alone. Hence, it does not follow that anything besides God is eternal. On the contrary, Jerome says that, quote, "God is the only one who has no beginning," end quote. Now, whatever has a beginning is not eternal. Therefore, God is the only one eternal. I answer that eternity truly and properly so called is in God alone, because eternity follows on immutability, as appears in the first article. But God alone is altogether immutable, as was shown above. Accordingly, however, some receive immutability from him, as they share his divine eternity. Thus, some receive immutability from God in the way of never ceasing to exist. In this sense, it is said of the earth, quote, "It standeth forever," end quote. Ecclesiastes 1:4. Again, some things are called eternal in Scripture because of the length of their duration, although they are in the nature corruptible. Thus, Psalm 75:5 says, "The hills are created, quote, eternal," end quote. And we read, quote, "of the fruits of the eternal hills," end quote, Deuteronomy 33:15. Some again share more fully than others in the nature of eternity, inasmuch as they possess unchangeableness, either in being or further still in operation, like the angels and the blessed who enjoy the word, because, quote, "as regards that vision of the word, no changing thoughts exist in the saints," end quote. As Augustine says, hence those who see God are said to have eternal life, according to the text, quote, "This is eternal life, that they may know thee are thee the only true God," etc. End quote. John 17:3. Article 4. Whether eternity differs from time. Objection 1. It seems that eternity does not differ from time, for two measures of duration cannot exist together unless one is part of the other. For instance, 2 days or 2 hours cannot be together. Nevertheless, we may say that a day or an hour are together, considering hour as part of day. But eternity and time occur together, each of which imports a certain measure of duration. Since therefore eternity is not part of time, forasmuch as eternity exceeds time and includes it, it seems that time is part of eternity and is not a different thing from eternity. Reply to objection 1. Such a reason would be a valid one if time and eternity were the same kind of measure. But this is seen not to be the case when we consider those things which the respective measure are time and eternity. Objection 2. Further, according to the philosopher, the now of time remains the same and the whole of time. But the nature of eternity seems to be that it is the same indivisible thing in the whole space of time. Therefore, the eternity is the now of time, but the now of time is not substantially different from time. Therefore, eternity is not substantially different from time. Reply to objection 2. The now of time is the same as regards its subject in the whole course of time, but it differs in aspect. For as much as time corresponds to the movement, its now corresponds to what is movable, and the thing immovable has the same one subject in all time, but differs in aspect, a being here and there, and such alteration is movement. Likewise, the flow of now as altering an aspect is time, but eternity remains the same according to both the subject and aspect. Hence, eternity is not the now of time. Objection 3. Further, as the measure of the first movement is the measure of every movement, as is said in physics, it thus appears that the measure of the first being is the same of every being. But eternity is the measure of the first being, that is, of the divine being. Therefore, eternity is the measure of every being, but the beings of things corruptible is measured by time. Time is therefore of eternity or part of eternity. Reply to objection 3. As eternity is proper measurement of permanent beings, so time is the proper measurement of movement. And hence, according as any being recedes from permanence of being and is subject to change, it recedes from eternity and is subject to time. Therefore, the being of things corruptible, because it is changeable, is not measured by eternity, but by time. For time measures not only things actually changed, but also things changeable. Hence, it is not only the measure of movement, but also measures repose, which belongs to whatever is naturally movable, but is not in actual motion. On the contrary, eternity is simultaneously whole, but time has a before and an after. Therefore, time and eternity are not the same thing. I answer that it is manifest that time and eternity are not the same. Some have found this difference on the fact that eternity has neither beginning nor end, whereas time has a beginning and an end. This, however, makes a merely accidental and not an absolute difference, because granted that time always was and always will be, according to the idea of those who think the movement of the heavens goes on forever, there would yet remain a difference between eternity and time, as Boethius says, arising from the fact that eternity is simultaneously whole, which cannot be applied to time, for eternity is the measure of a permanent being, while time is a measure of movement. Supposing, however, that the aforesaid difference be considered the part of the things measured, and not as regards to the measures, then there is some reason for it, inasmuch as that alone is measured by time, which has a beginning and end in time. Hence, if the movement of the heavens lasted always, time would not be of its measure as regards to the whole of its duration, since the infinite is not measurable, but would be the measure of the part of its revolution, which has a beginning and time. Another reason for the same can be taken from these measurements in themselves. If we consider the end and the beginning as potentialities, because granted that also time always goes on, yet is possible to note in time both the beginning and the end by considering its parts. Thus we speak of the beginning and the end of a day or a year, which cannot be applied to eternity, since these differences follow upon the essential and primary differences, that eternity is simultaneously whole, but time is not so. Article 5. The difference of aevernity and time. It seems that aevernity is the same as time, for Augustine says that, quote, God moves the spiritual things through time, but aevernity is simply the measure of the spiritual substances. Therefore, time is the same as aevernity. Reply to objection 1. Spiritual creatures are regarded as successive affections, and intelligences are measured by time. Hence, also Augustine says that to be moved through time is to be moved by affections, but as regards their nature, they are measured by aevernity, whereas regards the vision of the glory, they have a share of eternity. Objection 2. Further, it is essential to time to have a before and an after, but it is essential to eternity to be simultaneously whole, as was shown above in the first article. Now, aevernity is not eternity, for it is written, Sirach 1:1, that eternal, quote, wisdom is before age, end quote. Therefore, it is not simultaneously whole, but has before and after. Thus, it is the same as time. Reply to objection 2. Aevernity is simultaneously whole, yet it is not eternity, because before and after are compatible with it. Objection 3. Further, if there is no before and after in aevernity, it follows that in aevernal things there is no difference between being, have been, and or going to be. Since then, it is impossible for aevernal things not to have been. It follows that it is impossible for them not to be in the future, which is false, since God can reduce them to nothing. Reply to objection 3. In the very being of an angel, considered absolutely, there is no difference of past and future, but only as regards accidental change. Now, to say that an angel was, or is, or will be, is to be taken in a different sense according to the exception of our intellect, which apprehends the angelic existence by comparison with different parts of time. But when we say an angel is or was, we suppose something which, being supposed, is opposite, not is which is it is opposite. No, its opposite is not subject to the divine power. Whereas when we say that he will be, we do not yet as suppose anything. Hence, since existence and non-existence of an angel, considered absolutely, is subject to divine power, God can make the existence of an angel not future, but he can cause him not to be while he is, or not to have been after he has been. Objection 4. Further, since the duration of aevernal things is infinite, as to subsequent duration, if aevernity is simultaneously whole, it follows that some creature is actually infinite, which is impossible. Therefore, aevernity does not differ from time. Reply to objection 4. The duration of aevernity is infinite, forasmuch as it is not finished by time. Hence, there is no incongruity in saying that a creature is infinite, inasmuch as it is not the end by any other creature. On the contrary, Boethius says, quote, "Who commandeth time to be separate from aviarity?" End quote. I answer that aviarity differs from time and from eternity as the means between them both. This difference is explained by some to consist in the fact that eternity has neither beginning nor end, aviarity a beginning but no end, and time both beginning and end. The difference, however, is but accidental one, as was shown above in the preceding article, because even if aviational things have always been and would always be, some think as if they might even fail to be, which is possible for God to allow. Even granted this, avianity would still be distinguished from eternity and from time. Others assign the difference between these three to consist in the fact that eternity has no before and after, but time has both, together with innovation and veneration, and that avianity has before and after, without innovation and veneration. This theory, however, involves a contradiction, which manifestly appears if innovation and veneration be referred to the measure itself, since before and after of duration cannot exist together. If avianity has before and after, it must follow that with the receding of the first part of avianity, that the part of avianity must newly appear. Thus, innovation would occur in avianity itself, as it does in time. And if they be referred to things measured, even then an incongruity would follow. For a thing which exists in time grows old with time, because it is a changeable existence. And from the changeableness of a thing measured, there follows before and after in the measure, as is clear from physics. Therefore, the fact that an aviational thing is neither inveterate nor the subject to innovation comes from its changelessness, and consequently, its measure does not contain before and after. When we say that since eternity is the measure of a permanent being, insofar as anything recedes from permanence of being, it recedes from eternity. Now, some things recede from permanence of being, so that their being is subject to change, or consistent change, and these things are measured by time, as are all movements. And also, the beings of things corruptible, but others recede less from permanence of being, forasmuch their being neither consists in change, nor is a subject to change. Nevertheless, they have change annexed into them either actually or potentially. This appears in the heavenly bodies, the substantial being of which is unchangeable, and yet the very unchangeable being they have changeableness of place. The same applies to angels, who have an unchangeable being as regards their nature, with the changeableness as regards choice. Moreover, they have changeableness of intelligence, of affection, and of places in their own degree. Therefore, these are measured by avianity, which is the measure between eternity and time. But the being that is measured by eternity is not changeable, nor is it annexed to change. In this way, time has before and after. Avianity in itself has no before and after, which, however, can be annexed to it, while eternity has neither before nor after, nor is compatible with it such at all. Article 6. Whether there is only one avianity. Objection 1. It seems that there is not only one avianity, for it is written in the apocryphal books of Esdra, quote, "Majesty and power of age are with thee, O Lord." End quote. Reply to objection 1. Avianity is sometimes taken for age, that is, a space of a thing's duration, and thus we say many avianities when we mean ages. Objection 2. Further, different genera have different measures, but some avianal things belong to corporeal genus, as the heavenly bodies, and others are spiritual substances, as are the angels. Therefore, there is not only one avianity. Reply to objection 2. Although the heavenly bodies and spiritual things differ in the genus of their nature, still they agree in having a changeless being, and are thus measured by avianity. Objection 3. Further, since avianity is a term of duration, where there is only one avianity, there is also one duration. But not all avianal things have one duration, for some begin to exist after others, as appears in the case especially of human souls. Therefore, there is not only one avianity. Reply to objection 3. All temporal things do not begin together. Nevertheless, there is one time for all of them, by reason of the first measured by time, and thus all aviarinal things have one aviarinity by reason of the first, though they did not all begin together. Objection 4. Further, things do not depend on each other, do not seem to have one measure of duration. For there appears to be one time for all temporal things, since the first movement measured by time is in some way the cause of all movement. But aviarinal things do not depend on each other, for one angel is not the cause of another angel. Therefore there is not only one aviarinity. Reply to objection 4. For things to be measured by one, it is not necessary that they should be the cause of all, but that it be more simple than the rest. On the contrary, aviarinity is a more simple thing than time, and is nearer to eternity. But time is one only. Therefore, much more is an eternity only one. I answer that a twofold opinion exists on this subject. Some say that there is only one aviarinity, others that there are many aviarinities. Which of these is true may be considered from the cause why time is one. For we can rise from corporeal things to the knowledge of spiritual things. Now, some say that there is only one time for temporal things, for as much as one number exists for all things numbered. As time is a number, according to the philosopher, this, however, is not a sufficient reason, because time is not numbered. Time is not an abstract. Because time is not a number abstracted from the thing numbered, but existing in the thing numbered. Otherwise, it would not be continuous. For 10 ells of cloth are continuous not by reason of the number, but by the reason of the thing numbered. Now, number, as it exists in the thing numbered, is not the same for all, but it is different for different things. Hence, others assert that the unity of eternity, as the principle of all duration, is the cause of the unity of time. Thus, all durations are one in that view, in the light of their principle, but are many in the light of the diversity of things receive duration from the influx of the first principle. On the other hand, others assign primary matter as the cause why there is one time, as it is the first subject of movement, the measure of which is time. Neither of these reasons, however, is sufficient for as much as things which are in one's principle or in subject, especially if distant, are not absolutely one, but accidentally. Therefore, the true reason why time is one is to be found in the oneness of the first movement, by which, since it is most simple, all other movements are measured. Therefore, time is referred to that movement not only as a measure is to the thing measured, but also as accident is to subject, and thus receive unity from it. Whereas to other movements, it is compared only as the measure is to a thing measured. Hence, it is not only multiplied by their multitude, because by one separate measure many things can be measured. This being established, we must observe that a twofold opinion existed concerning spiritual substances. Some said that all proceed from God in a certain equality, as Origen said, or at least many of them, as some others thought. Others said that all spiritual substances proceed from God in a certain degree and order, and Dionysius seems to have thought so, when he said that among spiritual substances there are the first, the middle, and the last, even in one order of angels. Now, according to the first opinion, it must be said that there are many aviarinities, as there are many aviarinal things of the first degree. But according to the second, it would be necessary to say that there is only one aviarinity, because since each thing is measured by the most simple element of its genus, it must be that existence of all aviarinal things should be measured by the existence of the first aviarinal thing, which is all the more simple the nearer to its first. Wherefore, because the second opinion is truer, as will later be shown, we concede at the present that there is only one aviarinity. Question 11. The unity of God. Article 1. Whether one adds being. Let me try that again. Whether one adds anything to being. Objection 1. It seems that one adds something to being. For everything is a determinate genus by addition to being, which penetrates all genera, but one is a determinate genus, for it is the principle of number, which is a species of quantity. Therefore, one adds something to being. Reply to objection 1. Some thinking that one is convertible with being is the same as saying one, which is the principal number, were divided into contrary opinions. Pythagoras and Plato, seeing that one convertible with being did not add any reality to being, but signified the substance of being as undivided, thought that the same applied to one, which is the principle of number. And because number is composed of of unities, they thought that numbers were the substance of all things. Aquinas, however, on the contrary, considered that one, which is the principal number, added a reality to the substance of being. Otherwise, number made the unities would not be a species of quantity. Thought that the one convertible with being added to the reality of a substance of beings, as white to man. This, however, is manifestly false, inasmuch as each thing is one by its substance. For if a thing were one by anything else, but by its substance, for if the thing were one by anything else but its substance, since this again would be one, supposing it were one by another thing, we should be driven on to infinity. Hence, we must adhere to the foremost statement. Therefore, we must say that to be one, which is convertible with being, does not add to a reality of being, but the one, which is the principal number, does add to reality. But to that one, which is the principal number, does add a reality to being, belonging to the genus of quantity. Objection 2. Further, what divides a thing is common to all. Further, what divides a thing common to all is in addition to it. But being is divided by one and by many. Therefore, one is addition to being. Reply to objection 2. There is nothing to prevent a thing which is one way is divided from another being way undivided, as what is divided in number may be undivided in species. Thus it may be that a thing is in one way one, in another way many. Still, if it is absolutely undivided, either because it is so according to what belongs to its essence, though it may be divided as regards what is outside its essence, as what is one subject may have many accidents, or because it is undivided actually and divided potentially, as what is one and whole, and as many parts, and as such a case, a thing will be one absolutely and many accidentally. On the other hand, if it be undivided accidentally, and divided absolutely, as if it were in the case in essence, and undivided in idea or principle or cause, it may be many absolutely and one accidentally, as what are many in number and one in species, or one in principle. Hence, in that way, being is divided by one and by many, as it were by one absolutely and one and many accidentally. For multitude itself would not be contained under being, unless it were somehow contained under one. Thus Dionysius says that, quote, there is no kind of multitude that is not in a way one, but there are many in their parts are one, but what are many in their parts are one in their whole. And what are many in accidents are one in subject, and what are many in number are one in species, and what are many in species are one in genus, and what are many in processions are one in principle, end quote. On the contrary, Dionysius says, quote, nothing which exists is not in some way one, end quote, which would be false if one were in addition to being, in this sense of limiting it. Therefore, one is not an addition to being. I answer that one does not add any reality to being, but it is only a negation of division, for one means undivided being. This is the very reason why one is the same as being. Now, every being is either simple or compound, but what is simple is undivided, both actuality and potentially, whereas what is compound has not being whilst parts are divided, but after they make up and compose it. Hence it is manifest that the being of anything consists in undivision, and hence it is that everything guards itself. Hence it is everything guards its unity as guards its being. All right. We will continue on with Article 2, whether one and many are opposed to each other, tomorrow, continuing this question 11 on the unity of God. Thank you for joining me. If you made it this far and enjoyed this content, I would appreciate it if you were to share it with someone that you think would also enjoy it. I hope you have a blessed day, and I'm looking forward to praying with you on the Summa tomorrow.